Live from the apocalypse, they'll reboot everything but our dwindling water supply. Welcome to State of the Game.
Yay!
My name is Dano. I love doing this every week, but I have to tell you, if somebody came to me and said, I will give you a lifetime supply of cranberry juice to quit this thing, I would say, does my co-host get a lifetime supply as well?
Yeah.
And if they said yes, I'd be like, all good things come to an end.
Looking for the crew. Absolutely.
I love cranberry juice. So you just need to know that. My co-host joins me every week. There's something important nobody knows about him that I will divulge right now.
Uh-oh.
My co-host, K Diggy, is actually a group of kids who cast a magic spell to become a grown-up. It's heartwarming until the Amsterdam visit. We'll talk later. But thank you, Kay, for being here. You love
always a pleasure.
Yep. Our guest. This is an intro unlike any other. Our guest. If someone came to us, K Diggy, with a gun, an old gun, a musket, if someone had a musket right at
blunderbuss,
filled with powder, and said, you've got to pick one guest that you've had who right now can save your life with a cover version of Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody. This is my pick.
That's pressure, bro. But I would do that for you. Maybe I'll record a cover and I'll send it to you, and you can let me know whether it will save your life or not.
Well, that's the thing. Rich Jones from Chicago. You could totally record a cover of I Want to Dance with Somebody, throw it in the middle of your next album, and nobody would be like, that's weird. Everybody'd be like, right on.
That's again, this feels kind of like a challenge accepted moment. We'll see. Maybe that's what happens. I'll
be a hidden track.
Yeah. If by L we mean lawsuit, let's do this. So far I haven't been sued in music yet, so why not?
Co-produced by Green Slime and Solar 5.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll get something like kind of like a real down tempo, like minor chord.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me. This is actually epic timing because one of my friends who has been touring with a cover band, like a very well-known cover band. He just quit that cover band, and he's somebody I've kind of looked at as like a possible like kind of music director, so to speak. So maybe I'll get him on the horn in our first jam session. I'll be like, do you want to cover Whitney Houston with me?
No, if it was like Slime and Solar 5, it would end up like the John Cale version of Heartbreak Hotel, which is one of the great covers. But sure. I'm so happy to have you on, and I'm so happy to have the right topic. Today, we are talking about problem solving, okay? Problem solving. And Smoke Detector is great. This is the new album you did, Rich, with Iceberg Theory. It's great. And it is kind of a beautiful lesson in problem solving. Every time I hear it, it reminds me of that.
Why now? I'm curious. What about the album to you? Like, what problems do you think are being solved, or what's being desired as an outcome from a problem that someone may have?
So, and I brought this up. I brought this up to you while you were making music. We were talking, and I was like, "You've got like kind of too many high level skills, right?" There are some rappers that are like singing, but we don't like it. We'll take it, but we don't like it. Right? We're like, okay,
yeah,
thanks. But like, you are a really high level rapper and a really high level singer.
Thank
you. When you've got to balance those, you've got a diverse background in what music you like. you've got a lot to showcase, if that makes sense.
For sure. Well, I think as it pertains to Smoke Detector, it's interesting because I think we first came in tune because of How Do You Sleep at Night, and the rules that I gave myself for that project were, this is a rap project. Obviously there was some singing on there, but it was like, no, like we're making a hip hop project, and like let's kind of play it as straight as we can. And if there's a hook that needs to be in there, let's figure out how to keep it simple but good. And then Blue Beach is a bit more experimental. I feel like the first two songs and the last two songs are kind of side A, side B almost, where one's part more rappy, the other part's a bit more out there. So, you know, there's a divide and you're kind of getting a taste of each. Whereas I think with this album, I think it was a culmination of those two previous. I look at them as very much like related and part of almost like a semi trilogy. I know there's an EP in the mix, so it's kind of tough to, you know, say that that's part two necessarily. But you know, I think in terms of like choosing sounds or thinking about how I wanted to approach this, I really just think, you know, both of those projects gave me so much confidence in both ends of the spectrum for me that at that point it just comes down to balance. Like, can I find the right mix and blend, and also thinking about like what's tasteful in either direction. You know, certain things needed more than others, and you know, or needed certain things more than others. So I think at a certain point it became, how do we balance out some of the weirder leanings and still make it listenable? Because I'm not necessarily trying to have it be such a simple listen that, oh, okay, I get it. You know, I think there's a lot of stuff hidden and worked into there that I think people are going to be finding if they give this a lot of repeat listens.
Totally. Totally. No, and I think I think I didn't really understand the Montana Max Sleep at Night album until COVID hit and I was watching your empty venue performance a lot. I was watching it a lot and I was like, man, there's like, I feel like you mastered those precious moments where they're like tender moments.
Yeah.
In the album. There's still rap, there's still themes, there's still a lot discussed, but it's in this, it's almost a lullaby, you know?
Interesting. Okay. All right. That tracks.
And so you just like, you put that in the chamber and then you're like, now I want to rap. and you started rapping and kind of, but you had that in the chamber, had that in your back pocket, and you could use that. And you've kind of developed from there outwardly to different chambers. Does that make sense?
Totally. I think at this point, it's just finding a way to emotionally gut punch people, you know, blending either. It could be from something that's spoken very candidly and pointedly, or it could be something that's said beautifully or flowed beautifully. You know, I feel like we talked about this last time, and I'll say it a million times over if I have to. I still am mad that Post Malone said you can't make emotional hip hop music. Like that's the biggest lie fucking of all. You know, it's just ridiculous. Like I feel like in some ways some of the stuff I've made is like, it's kind of like a big fuck you to him in terms of like, we can't do that. Well, let me show you how you could do it without being a fucking cornball or without doing some like logic level bullshit. You know, it's just like there's a way for this to be done tastefully and honestly and earnestly, and here it is. You know, so yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the reason I've never had like a bad feeling about Post Malone is because it's very clear, even from that statement, that he hates his job way more than we hate his job. Like he hates it. You can see it when they bring him out on a big event, he performs, he's terrible. He hates it. He just hates it. Like he wants to be free of his job. Like, but it pays too well. You know?
I mean, yeah, the money's good, and you know, I think certain people, I guess it depends what they're doing it for. A guy like that, I mean, you want to give up access to like the quote unquote best of the best music wise? Like I don't think he does. You know, I think that's one thing I would say as I you know am continuing my journey in this. Like I think a thing that keeps me coming back is I want to work with the best of the best too, to my definition of that. And I think like locally, And outside of Chicago, I'm starting to get there. I'm starting to kind of get out of the nest a bit and do that. But it's going to be people I know. Like I can rattle off a bunch of artists that I love, and a lot of people like, oh yeah, I've never heard of them. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you haven't, but like to me, they're just as important as like everyone, these other artists that other people might put on a pedestal. Again, this is the very subjective nature of this shit. Is like the people that we root for and the people that we're like pumped about are definitely not gonna. It's not gonna be perfect for every single person in terms of a match or a fit. So yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. No, okay. What did you think of Smoke Detector when you heard it?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I think to go back to the problem solving theme, there is a conscious balance of the singing and rapping elements. I thought that there were a lot of, I guess, I think the word I wrote down were surprises. There were a lot of things that happened, and musically, beat wise, even some rapping wise, that would happen, and I wouldn't be expecting it.
Yep.
So it kind of kept me on my toes a little bit.
What were some surprises?
Like I think of Blankets. Like I think you have Blankets. So track 6 with Yomi, Curly Castros, Samara Truth, and Reno Cruz.
Samira Truth.
Samira Truth. There was like a mandolin that came in.
Yeah.
At the end of it.
So Yomi is playing harp, and then Reno Cruz, he busts in with the guitar for like an outro, and the way so she's got a harp, and then he kind of, the way his section comes in, it almost comes in like a slide guitar, which I was super pumped about. Like that whole song is you want to talk about surprises. The original version of that song was like 2.5 minutes. And I played it for my one friend, and I was like, I hear a song where it's really simple, and I get Castro's, because he was the only, I think, person I had, I think, confirmed on that. And then it just kind of worked out where both him and Samira wanted on this. And then, why I played it for my one friend, he was just like, dude, like, there's a crazier song. If you want it, you should think about it. And so I was like, okay, fuck it. Let's go. Like, what's my version of like Maggot Brain if I could do that or something, So
that's awesome.
And that, and obviously the last few projects have been a really great learning experience on like mixing my own shit and mixing other people's vocals. This is my first time mixing instruments and like learning how to like get those to kind of sit well amongst everything. So yeah, that song was a big surprise for me too, just in terms of like, wow, I guess I can do this now. But I think was the I think the thing I liked best about that and where it sits is that I don't know if you looked at the track listing, but it's listed as side A and side B, and it's meant to kind of be a mid-album finale of sorts. To kind of
okay, that makes sense.
That's why it kind of goes big and isn't afraid of like rushing, because in my mind, if you're listening to this on tape or on vinyl, or even in your actual life, you can just hit pause, and then Dream Life is like, okay, we're getting back to our seats, we got our popcorn, we're getting ready to, part 2 is in effect. And Dream Life is also the most fantastical, because it's like, it's not real. The song, I wrote that towards the end of the album when I was working on stuff, and I'd scraped almost everything I could about my experiences in Chicago to date, and I was like, well, fuck, like this just feels like I'm just like jubilant and I'm somewhere totally different. So what's the theme? What's the vibe? And honestly, like, the big question became, if I could be anywhere in the world or moment in my life, where would I be right now, given everything? And I was like, well, shit, I want to be back in Italy on the beach in 2019 with my 2 buddies, just chilling, and like there's not much worry, and it's kind of like the end of this vacation. So like that's what the verse is about. It's kind of like the money being short and you're kind of tired, but you're feeling good. And then the end, it's the first song I wrote where it's like basically all a verse and then just ends on like a power hook of sorts to kind of bring it all home. And is honest, because like I think when I was doing this, it was like January or like early February in Chicago, and it's just cold as fuck. And I'm working out on my friend's studio where you can't smoke weed in the studio, so I'm like cutting out to his fire escape to like take a couple of hits of a joint or something, and it's just too fucking cold. So I'm like, all right, back inside, and so I'm like, take me back for real, because like this isn't gonna work. So yeah, just in terms of like album organization and stuff like that. That's kind of how I planned it out. So I'm glad you thought blankets was a surprise, and that was kind of the thinking of like how I wanted to set it up is like let's give someone a really big potent moment, and then start off with a more easy kind of vibe.
Yeah, okay.
Part B that isn't real. Again, it's fantasy, because I think one thing I don't know if I've made this clear enough in terms of some of the other conversations I've had. Like, I wrote or conceptualized most of this album while driving around Chicago, and really just listening to the beats over and over and over again until it was just like, all right, I'm ready to do this one today, or maybe I'm ready to do this one today. It wasn't really a rushed thing, other than like I'd try to have at least 1 or 2 new things to Iceberg like once a month, if that, and just I wanted to feel it all. So it's kind of like kind of like Travis Bickle meets the dude, sort of, in terms of the energy, minus me wanting to kill a presidential candidate. But yeah, it's just it's dark. It's super dark, and so I think like in terms of the universe that's in, it's something where I'm kind of pooling from kind of the beauty and the madness of where I'm from and all the things I see, because for my gig I cruise the whole city. I see everywhere. It's not like I'm just in my little loop of like the Logan Square Humboldt Park area. Nah, I'm gonna cover it from end to end, and I'm gonna see everything, even if it's just snapshots of what's happening. And that's a certain totality that's like fucking great and awesome to experience. But it's, you don't know what you're gonna see on any given day either, especially if depending, things can happen anywhere. But there's certain things I wish I could unsee. There's things I wouldn't trade anything in the world to give back. You know what I mean? So I guess I make this point specifically because at the end of Dream Life, part of the reason 600 Paid comes in as hard as it does is because it's meant to be like a snap of the fingers and we're brought back to reality. And we're in the middle of Humboldt Park, and there's like 2 feet of snow, and it's like that gray slushy, like the trucks have been out in snow, and it's not nice and it's not pretty. And it's just we had our moment of the mind to go elsewhere, but now we're back in it, and it's just you got to make it. It's the victory is making it to the next day kind of thing.
100%.
So, yeah.
Amen.
No, and I'm glad you brought that. I was about to bring, because that is to be the biggest change, is going from Dream Life to 600 Paid.
Yeah,
but it is it's really important, and I think it's, when we're talking about problem solving, like, what is the problem we're solving? Well, art is the problem we're solving, because art never ends up where you want it to be. It's the opposite of math, right? You have a thesis, and your thesis by the end goes away, right?
Or you pull back the mold and hope that it came out the way you wanted it. It
mutates. It mutates into something new.
Sure. Which I think in this case, like in terms of like pulling the mold and looking upon my creation or our creation in this moment, I think I don't really know if there's much I could have done differently. I think we did exactly what we came here to do with this project. And as a writer, I was, as I say, I was pretty well tapped by the end. So to get those last few things out of me took really just being by myself in a room by myself without any distractions. And then I was able to like pull it out. But yeah, it definitely, I'd say if we're going to talk about the problems of this album, we're just like, especially because I chose so many beats all at once to kind of check out. It's like, okay, like what do we prioritize in terms of getting done? And then from there, it's like, what am I hearing here? Because it's in my mind, it was never going to be an album of just me. I'm going to look for opportunities to who else do I hear here? What instruments do I possibly hear here? Kind of being able to start taking those risks and chances by reaching out for collaboration and seeing who's down, and or vice versa. In this case, I got really lucky that Castro reached out to me and was like, dude, I'd love to do something. If you have something, let me know. And I'm just like, well, fuck yeah, that's amazing. Let's go.
Awesome.
Let me know which beats you want to, you're messing with, and we can whittle it down to one. And, he just happens to choose blankets, and then here we are, you know what I mean? And I think, so I'd say the main thing was just maintaining tone throughout, especially over the course of a year of kind of putting this together. And then from there, looking into the design side of it and figuring out how I want to present this. How do I want to promote this? Because like, I don't know, I on the digital, it's just a single piece of art. But if you go on Bandcamp, every single song has a cover for it. And that was like a fun project that I did for myself, where I was like, I want to, first off, again, I'm driving all over the city. I'm taking pictures of all sorts of crazy shit. Or I had friends that were taking some cool photos. And so I paid them to use their image for something. And, that said, it really became this kind of task I could provide myself for the days or moments where I didn't feel like writing anything new. It's like, okay, but we could still move forward in terms of how we're going to present this to other people. And excuse me. So luckily, that was really a fun, I guess, problem I gave myself, or kind of like job I gave myself, that I really took to, because then you start thinking about like, just, different ways of both streamlining the process, but then also allowing for human error to kind of define this as like a human made project, like maybe I didn't get the tint just right from one thing to the other. And it's like, I don't care, and in my mind, a lot of what I was going for image wise was like based off of like paperback novels or like VHS cassette covers that like I'd see as a kid growing up. And especially like the paperback books, if you're like talking like like either like dime store, like detective things, or like sci-fi, whatever the case, just something that would seem like it has been sitting on your aunt's coffee table for 20 years and in the sun directly, and whatever the original tones were, it's shifted. So I allowed myself the freedom to not be a stickler in certain ways, but then obviously, being very on point in others, because I wanted to make sure there was a through thread for everything.
The three words that I think you said that are most important is maintaining tone throughout, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed, Kay, on this, listen to the first lines of these songs. Like the first line of Chilly is like, brings you right to it. This is a chilly Chicago day, and we're here. Rich, the first line of Tuna Melt. Can you give us the first line of Tuna Melt?
Do you want to have the tuna melt I left in the car? It's parked a block away. Hey, it ain't that far. You say you're hungry. Well, let's see how hungry you are. Or something like that. And that one specifically, like, I had a lot of people like push back on that. They're like, I think that's stupid. I don't know what you're doing with that. And I said, quite simply, does the concept of eating a tuna melt that's been sitting in a car sound appetizing to you? And they're like, no. I said, okay, well then the reason I'm putting it like this is like, to me, it was a very specific rebuttal, or I guess kind of framing of how I think we as people on this planet and citizens of this country have really been left in just to kind of fend for ourselves, and any help that has been put our way in a lot of respects in the grand scheme has been like a tuna melt that's been sitting in your car. Like it's like you'll eat it and you're gonna maybe feel kind of gross and not so good, maybe even get sick, but we gave you something though, and so maybe I was trying to be too cute or too something with that, but it felt fitting in the moment. And if I can make Davis laugh with something, then I feel like I'm generally onto something. And so that was fun, especially like with that. I felt like every song on this album kind of felt like it was like a chapter in a movie. And for that one kind of feels like you're kind of, it's like Jackie Brown-esque. Like I just saw like shelves of cassette tapes and like like maybe like pawn shop gold chains, and like you're in like a beater car smoking a spliff, and you're getting a sense of the universe that you're in more fully after the introduction song of Chilly, because Chilly almost comes in like the helicopter crane shot or something of like an overview of a city or kind of like of the universe you're entering. And then you get street level with Tuna Melt, where it's like, nah, we're in it, you know what I mean? And then it kind of goes from there.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so what, well, it's a two-part question. Like, what were some of your inspirations for Smoke Detector? And then two, what was the musical aesthetic that you were aiming for the album?
I mean, inspiration wise, a lot of it mainly just comes back to movies and just watching a lot of movies. I don't really feel like I was like studying up on other writers or MCs really as much. I think it's just like finding different veins of cinema that I like and thinking about ways of weaving in certain energies into the project. And
are there any movies in particular that you can recall that?
I mean, it's a lot of movies that like do a really good job of like universe building. So if you're watching that movie, I feel like you're in that universe. That's kind of something the way I term it. So I feel like Boogie Nights, Apocalypse Now, Dog Day Afternoon, um, Taxi Driver, a Big Lebowski, things like movies like that in a way, because you need some levity. It can't all be fucking
Right.
come on the back of taxi cab seats and shooting pimps. So it's something I just I don't know, those sorts of loner type characters are like, people that are out here, trying to get it while also dealing with all the fucked up shit in that universe,
Right.
and still finding a way to survive and whatnot, or find joy, or again, if somebody's just getting to the very next day. I thought those were all super inspirational in that sense. And I think, especially because I'd spent and do spend so much time by myself in the car, there's just a lot of self dialogue, I guess, in those moments, or kind of just like talking to yourself, or just whether it's in your head or something you say out loud. It's I don't know, I felt a lot of kindred energy in that, especially as you start to wonder day in and day out when you don't have consistent feedback of like a coworker or someone that you're like in a space with every day that like isn't, say, your lover or your parent or something. It's like who the fuck even am I? You just feel kind of especially out here, and kind of I don't know. Yeah, sometimes it's a big question mark. Luckily, I think this project allowed me to kind of exercise that question. I think, I came out the other side of this in much better shape, both professionally and personally. So I think whatever I was missing, I have a bigger sense of the picture now. So I'm very grateful for the experience. And I don't want to call it like something as simple as like music therapy, because I think that would be doing a disservice to it. It wasn't like that concerted of an effort in that sense, but I think in finding a way to like express myself and kind of just express the energy of this time and find other voices that can share in that expression, I think that was this is about as good a job as I can do right now in doing that. I think if anything, one of the things I'm proudest most of this album, I'm most proud of this album is, in the selection of my co-features and in bringing in these other characters into this universe. The characters just happen to be people that I love, or new friends or old friends or whatever, but it doesn't matter. You're getting a sense of like the folks that could be around me in this moment. Casually or otherwise. And so like I think from a executive producer's kind of standpoint, I give myself a big pat on the back, because I don't think I had a miss in terms of like, oh, I think this person's voice will sound good, and then like I didn't have to go back to anybody and be like, can I get a redo?
Right.
I've over the years found gentler ways to do that, versus maybe in my younger times I would have been a bit more, I don't ever want to be an asshole to people, but I'm sure there were people I could have been gentler with. And so I took great pains if there was a correction or something I needed differently, which again, I didn't need it this time, so it was fine, but it was just like, okay, this just all flowed super well. Yeah, I don't know, I guess from a standpoint of like beat selection and then vocalist selection and merging those two things together, I had a really good time doing that. And who knows, maybe as I'm not like on a break right now, but helping other people figure out those questions. And again, to the topic of problem solving, I'm here. If you're listening and you're watching this and you want to figure, you're a producer and you want some vocalists that you think would sound good, call me. We'll have a talk. I could make some suggestions, because that's the one thing I think my life is, it's not always by design, it's also by circumstance. And I think for me, I'm a crossroads individual. I connect a lot of different people from different spectrums of music or art or kind of anything. And so like for MCs that don't know any producers, I'm kind of like a good person to know, because I know many producers. For producers that don't know many MCs, I know many MCs. I'm a great person for that. So I think like that's something, as I get older especially, and as I kind of, I don't know, transition to whatever the hell the next thing is for me, I would love the opportunity to start building projects or helping people build their projects. And obviously it's on their terms. It's what they want to do with it. But it's definitely, you know, I think I proved that I'm really good at that with this one, and I'd love it, the opportunity to do it for other people.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's the problem solving is almost like the chessboard on top of the chessboard on top of the chessboard, where you're playing 3 different games of chess at once. Like you end up becoming the player, the coach, the general manager, and the owner, right? We talked about this with like somebody like Billy Woods, right? Who's like rapping seriously about what he's doing, but is also like, do I have the cover art? You know, are my guests right? And it's like masterminding it at the same time.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the player coach analogy, because like I had a family member ask me the other day, so are you moving more into the business side of things? Is that where you're at? And I said, not really. No, because I'm capable of doing that doesn't mean that's all I want to do. You know, obviously my play is more on the marketing side and kind of in that world in terms of like an outside of making records way that I could be of help to somebody. But yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. It's funny because every performance I've booked this year has been canceled. So I haven't done a single show this year. I'm actually kind of like, I'm not scared. You know, it's one of those things where it's kind of like this monolithic thing now where it's like, fuck, man, like I haven't done it. And so I'm supposed to play this show on Saturday, right? And I'm very excited for it. It's going to be super easy. It's going to be like 3 songs. I'm a feature, you know, super, super chill. But I bring this up to say, when we talk about someone being a player, I think as a performer, it's something that I have gotten good at. And I look forward to like finding out what that means for me to get like scary good at. I think right now I'm scary good at recording records and writing songs and getting that done in a timely fashion. And so that's the type of player I am. I'm a studio creature at this moment. And I think my next ambition is, how do I take the studio creature ethos and the way that I can kind of bump back and forth and then become that for a live show as well? Because that's the other thing, man. Like I think in a really bad way, I've been to too many shows. I'm like the worst audience member you could possibly have if I'm not like locked in. Because otherwise I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna nitpick everything in my head, and I feel like such an asshole. I'm such a miserable person sometimes it shows, and I feel terribly about it, especially when I know people are killing it. It's just like I've seen too much. I've been to too much. I burnt myself out at some point between 2009 to 2019 to the point where it's just like I'll put it to you like this. I think the things that are going to catch my attention, and I think more of us need to think about when it comes to this, is I think we need to be more intentional with what a show even fucking is. Because at this point, if we're going to ask people to stand around us with their hands in their pockets as an experience, and for them to probably be sort of paying attention, but not really, I don't want that. I don't give a shit about that anymore. I played that show so many times, and I'll probably play it again. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to stick my nose up in the air, because half this shit again is about being around people, about, you know, sharing in this. And I'm out of practice with that. You know, I miss being around other MCs. I miss being around like other movers and shakers in this shit, because that's a fun energy to create around, and then to kind of get your performance cues from and whatnot. I guess I would say, and I know this is my goal, is I want to start being more conscious about the you know, on some Sun Tzu shit. What's the battlefield? I'm choosing my battlefield for this. I'm going to set up this environment so that the audience is going to get the experience that I really want for them, and they're going to also accept that that's the experience they're getting. They're not going to be on their phone. They're not going to be, you know, distracted by XYZ. It's going to be something where you are here for a reason. And I don't feel like people have come back to that, especially we were in our homes for so many years. So like everyone kind of feels like you're still in your house. So I'm surprised that there's as many people that aren't still wearing pajamas that I see out in the world, frankly, you know? So it's like, you know, who knows, maybe I'll learn to chill out and it'll be fun again. But I would just say, like, I know for me, I want to create something where you showed up to this show because you're here for the show. You're not going to be thinking about what's on Twitter or what's on TikTok or anything. No, like, this is the thing. This is the event. And thinking about what steps need to be taken so that someone buys into that conceit, so that someone, you know, is willing to buy into that this is my evening and it's being curated by this person, and I'm not going to think about any other bullshit.
Totally. No,
sorry to get kind of intense about it. It's just been
look, it makes-
preoccupying me. So
we need to be able to shift gears into different kind of performances, and hip hop's had problems with that since the infrastructure dropped out of it. But
you know who isn't bad at live performing and who's amazing and who's been on your show before is Yuta Baby. Oh my gosh.
Oh, Yuta Baby, love
Yuta
you.
Baby. Yeah, that was a show I saw recently, and that was just watching people fall in love with them was amazing. Or my friends Orishun, they're a two-piece rock band. I saw them perform with my friend Justice Hill last week. You know, there's sometimes I can turn my brain off and just enjoy what my friends are doing, and that's
awesome.
Great. But
Yeah.
you know, it's I would just say for the most part, if we can figure out a way to evolve what our expectations are ourselves and then have the audience do the same, I think we'll be in a much more exciting place.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get to these 3 albums and get to some problem solving. Right?
Okay.
We can't beat around the bush. The elephant in the room, drill music in Zion, Lupe Fiasco. So this is an album that is, since it dropped, honestly, I think it's gotten more attention than Kendrick's album.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think I understand why a little bit. And so first of all, let me pitch what I think is the problem that he's solving here. Right?
Okay.
So Lupe, I learned a lot listening to Lupe, right? Lupe taught me a lot because I remember there was a point in listening to Lupe where I was saying, he's great at hooks, his flow's great, he's a great beat picker, but I hate this album. Why? Right? What is wrong with me? Right? And I started to understand, like, oh, there's a likability quotient that has to be factored in here, right? When you're listening to a rap album, you're spending a lot of time with a person. And if the person's kind of an a-hole or treating you like an a-hole, you don't want to stay with them. So there were periods of Lupe's career where I didn't want to hang out with him. But there were periods where I was like, you're getting better here. The problem is Lupe is an overthinker to the maximum, right? And I think by putting himself within the 3-day recording process with good supporters, he tried to whittle that down. It's still 41 minutes long, but it's 10 songs.
You're right.
So it's less crazy concept songs that don't go anywhere. It's less of all that stuff.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I mean, anytime you listen to Lupe, you're gonna have to exert some intellectual energy. So I mean, if it's over, if it's over an hour of it, you're just gonna get tired. And then by the end, you're like, oh, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do that again, but that was good, but I don't know. Like, it's a little bit too much for me. I think the 41 minutes, I think the 10 songs, it gives you just enough where you can hear it and then go back to it and really kind of digest it. If that's what you'd like to do.
Yep. And is Naima the name of the person who does all the hooks?
Let me see. I know it starts with an N. It is not Naira.
Amazing. Does an amazing job, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's the Scottie Pippen of this situation. So how did you take it, Rich? How was the experience?
Honestly, this because I know when you first sent over the list of things we're going to talk about, I said, this is I was prepared to be not savage, but I was really prepared to not like this. And I think before I go into this, I want to go back in time to when the song Beautiful Girls with Bruno Mars and B.O.B. came out. because around that time, I remember it was on Hip Hop DX or one of those websites, the version with Lupe Fiasco leaked. So it was going to be Lupe and not B.O.B. on that song. And I'll never forget how sad I felt listening to his demo on that song, because the Lupe Fiasco that I fell in love with in 2006 would have skated on that shit like 3 times over, and it would have been a massacre, and it would have been great. The person I heard on that record sounded like the guy who had sold shit tons of albums and Atlantic still wasn't going to trust. So I think, we're talking about someone who I think, whether they're an overthinker or not, I definitely think their confidence in being able to make the things that they want to make was shooken pretty hard. And I think that the music that they've made in the aftermath of that moment has reflected that. And I haven't been in tune really with much of what he's done. It's all respect. It's all love. Look, I was there in 2006 when he was at the Metro, and he did, kick push literally 6 times in a row. Like, it was a moment. I was on fucking crutches and I'm fucking like rocking. You know what I mean? Like, it was a beautiful thing. Here's this guy, he has this hit song. I'll never forget. I was in the car with my dad that summer when that song was on the radio, and there was like some big skateboard meetup in downtown Chicago. And so you're on Lakeshore Drive, and it's just like the inner drive. The bike path along the lakefront is just packed with skateboarders, just like all skating in the same direction. So to be hearing that song while seeing that's a beautiful moment. But I digress. So to then bring it to this thing, I feel like this album, especially with the way he describes how he did it, I think this just seems like it's the best he's sounded in terms of his beat selection. It's the healthiest he's sounded in terms of his flow and him believing in the energy, what he has to say. I think like he was getting bogged down, I think, in some of his writing, I feel like, in recent years. And with this one, I feel like this is the most balanced Lupe project I've heard in over a decade. And I'm really happy if this means he's back or is going to be making more things like this, then fucking awesome. Because like he's a world-class talent when he's on. And I just think
World-class talent.
the industry, I think, kind of bore through him a little bit. And I don't think, I think there were certain expectations placed on him early too, that, I mean, look, I'm going to say he didn't live up to it, but it doesn't mean that he's lost or that he's like, not relevant. I mean, here we are talking about him like 15 years, 16 years later. And it's, that says a lot about longevity at that point. And so I don't know. And again, he still also has 2 classic albums, I feel like, under his belt too, or at least 2 albums that were very highly conceptualized and prove that he could execute an idea to like a very high degree. So you can't take none of that away from the guy. I just think like, as it shows on this album, I think like it had like the right amounts of bounce for certain records. I think he was able to show a really nice mixture of sounds that I think are reflective of him, especially because coming from Chicago, I'll say it, a bunch of other people say it, we don't have a signature sound per se, which means that we're exposed to a lot of different, I guess, strains of hip hop. You might have some more trunk rattler shit. You might have something that's more sample based and kind of like on like a more old school boom bap tip. But coming from that sort of background, we can appreciate all those different things. I won't speak for him in that, but hearing him at least be able to take sounds that people are familiar for him working with, and then also incorporate things that I think are more in his wheelhouse, to maybe have a bit more like that bass and that bounce, and kind of I think allow him to connect more with I think the things that he kind of wanted to make all along, instead of kind of the more like nerd hop kind of spot that I think he got unfairly pigeonholed into. I think, this is just fantastic in that sense. I mean, look, no one's going to bat 1,000 with anything. And I think the only things that I think hit me on certain things was I think he could have, there's certain things I would have done differently. But again, I'm just really happy to hear music from him where he sounds happy and where he just sounds very comfortable with where he's at. Because if we're getting more of this, then great. I will tune in again and again and again. And it's an exciting thing to think about.
Yep. And to follow that point, Kay, I would say Carrera era.
Well, I think,
no, it's the best Lupe in years, right? And I had a reassessment of it, because I think I had Lupe in my head as this person who was like always trying to convince us that he was fancy, right? And Black Lamore, shout out to Black Lamore, came on and brought these inspirations, and one of them was the Cool. And we listened to the Cool again with a clear head years later, and I was like, his label couldn't sell the guy who made Superstar?
Right?
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Funny. Yeah.
Like Lupe was never Mr. Underground, too dense. This is an Aesop Rock. Big, juicy hooks, right? Crazy fun flow. Like, this is somebody who the label couldn't figure out how to sell him because they were bad at being a label.
Definitely. Definitely.
Like,
oh yeah.
This right now, this time is the best time for Lupe Fiasco. This is an audience that is used to like having intellectual discourse in big hooky songs. You know, go for it.
I think he was a little bit ahead of his time. You're right. Yeah. If the Cool had come out, let's say 10 years later, it would probably been considered a modern day classic. I mean, it probably would have been. I mean, he's not really doing anything different than Kendrick is in some senses, obviously, but in terms of, you know, creativity wise and conceptual wise and doing concepts for albums. So he was just a little bit ahead of his time in a way that wasn't beneficial to him.
Yep.
I that's the thing. I agree to a certain extent, but I don't know, man. He was doing he was popping for a while. I think, like, you know, did he get to Jay-Z level? Did he get to Kanye level? No, but like, at least in Chicago, you know, I feel like for a city that it's really hard to get, you know, kind of a general mass understanding or appreciation for an artist. He accomplished that in Chicago. He was able to get the heads behind him. He was able to get normal fucking people behind him. And that's a rarity. Like, I feel like the only people I feel like in my mind where that kind of applies from that time is like him or the Cool Kids. Like, those are two acts from that time where it's like they were able to transcend and able to appeal to so many different types of people. Like, you know, I think Lupe might have been the first rapper I saw with a band that wasn't the Roots, and it was like Lollapalooza, and like, because that's the thing. I saw a ton of Lupe shows randomly from like 2006 to like 2012, so I kind of got to see his evolution as a performer with like a DJ to a band for like the larger shows. And I remember at the time, and I'm not a fan of live band hip hop, for the record. But given the stage of Lollapalooza, I'm like, this makes absolute sense that he would build out a live show for this that would match that. So, you know, I don't know. I think, you know, in terms of the way we look at him now, you know, yeah, maybe he missed his time for now. Maybe he could have been a bigger thing now, but I think he was still pretty fucking big for back then too.
There's no denying that, right?
Yeah.
Like, Lupe's first 4 albums went gold while his label hated it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty incredible. So there's no denying on that. I mean,
For sure.
to get critical on this album, right? There's a little bit of a magic trick that Lupe does throughout this album that grinds my gears just a little bit, right? And what he'll do is he'll start out and say, you have, you know, a hypocritical aspect to you. You love chains, jewelry. You love that materialistic stuff. And then he'll be like, I love chains, jewelry, that materialistic stuff. Sometimes. Isn't that wild? We're contradicting at the same time. It's almost as if the human experience is contradiction. And he does this multiple times. The last song is an example of that too, where it's like rappers die too often, and then 2 bars later he's shooting someone in the face, and then he's calling himself out for it, and it's this magic trick again. And on repeat listens, it bothers me a little bit.
Well, I think some of that, again, could be in a response to like what I said earlier about the pigeonholing of his stuff. I mean, like the first feature I ever heard of his was on a mixtape by a group called White Chalk, which is like very thoroughly gangster rap. I bought it off a guy on Michigan Avenue who was selling mixtapes, and like That's the first time I ever heard. And so those are the sorts of people he's running with. He's not running with the Quells and the typical cats of the world and whatnot.
Right.
So I think that sort of duality for him in terms of like the way they wanted to market him, and I think where his mind was, were very divergent. I mean, like, he's able to hold his own on like a song with Bun B around this time. And I think, and some people would look at that as a novelty, whereas for him, it's probably like he personally feels more at home on that sort of production and kind of doing those sorts of laps than, doing something that's kind of more in like a Q-tip light kind of wave,
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, no, there's a part of me that feels like Lupe spent a bunch of his career telling his audience that they don't understand what he's saying. And my problem is, if you've been a Lupe fan, as long as he's, from whatever, 06 till now, you probably do get a lot of what he's saying. You're probably not lost. And you should probably get that respect.
For sure. Well, I mean, I say this as someone who thoroughly checked out the last decade.
Yeah.
I was not a good fan or like a studious person in terms of like, oh, I need to at least like give this the respect listen. I blame the Enemy of the State mixtape. Like that shit honestly like turned me off so thoroughly that I think I turned my back on him after that. That was in 2011. So again, if this is a return, kind of a return to form, or a new chapter where he's able to kind of have the freedom to do this stuff. Because I mean, I didn't see, did he self-release this, or is this through like an imprint of his own, or what is it?
Let me see.
Hold on, I'm gonna go to it is.
I think it's on
first and
Bandcamp too.
15th.
I think there's a Bandcamp.
Okay, so it's technically a 1st and 15th release of some sort, as alive as 1st and 15th may or may not be.
Good deal. Yeah, first
Yeah.
and 15th. Yep.
Okay, so he is self-released basically then.
Distributed by 30 Tigers, which is legit. So
what's 30 Tigers? I've never heard of them.
They're like a distribution thing. They do a lot of music. They distribute a lot of important music. I've seen them all over. But it's I would see so but this is he's very free on this. It's
for sure.
This is fun to listen to because it's free. There are goofy moments, right? The Carrera era, but Precious Things is so beautiful. You still get your kiosk, Miss Mural, concept songs.
Ms. Mural made me smile. That sounded like, it's been a while since I've heard someone try to tell like a narrative sort of hip hop song where I haven't like wanted to roll my eyes, to the back of my head and back.
Right.
And in this instance, it just was like, oh yeah, it almost felt like old friend shit. I remember the person that could do this, and they're still doing this, and they're still doing this well, and they actually sound energized while they're doing it. It's I think it's they've mastered this trick, and I think remastered it even to make it palatable for someone who's seen the trick before or heard the trick before. So that that's cool to see. But yeah, man, Lupe, call me. Let's hang out. Let's eat some food.
Yeah. So, Kay, did you have any like moments for you that were really like, wow, this is great?
I mean, I thought Kiosk was great. I love drill music in Zion. And I liked on Fo's Nem.
Yep.
On Fo Nem. Yeah. I just thought it was like really focused. I thought the restrictions, for some artists, like they need restrictions. I mean, like if you have it's like you need a fence around your yard, I guess you could say is the best way to say it. You can get overwhelmed when you have so many options, so much free space. So when you put like a fence around your creativity, I think it really helps someone like Lupe, who has like I can't even imagine how his mind operates, but I'm guessing he's got a lot going on in there.
100%. Yeah.
So I mean, you could definitely hear the focus. I thought the 10 tracks was just enough, and there's a lot that a lot of rappers could learn from this album.
Yep. No, it's I don't want to give the impression that I hate Lupe or ever hated Lupe. This album is such a good representation of my relationship with Lupe, where like there'll be a verse where he'll annoy me, and then he'll follow it with a verse that I can't hear enough. That I'll just be like, oh, this is amazing. Like I have a cantankerous relationship with Lupe, but but I love how this album ends. I love Seattle into On Phone. I love how it ends. I love how it begins with the Lions Dean, with Aisha Jocko, and Tagati. It's just it really feels like a place. So I'm excited about it, and yeah, I would love for him to do this kind of thing. But like I would love for him to never make a long album again. That would be good.
Yeah.
Well, if he makes a long album, it would be cool to see it maybe with some other people. Like imagine if Child Rebel Soldiers actually hits, like, and that gets to be not. They're never gonna bring that back, but like,
never.
I just think about, and this is something I ask myself is like, how do I take my skill set and possibly put it into like a larger context where I'm like 10% of something versus like being the main person. And a guy like that, obviously he's a name, but how could he possibly fit into like a collective or kind of like group effort? And I think for people like him and myself, that's sort of a final frontier in that moment is, can you kind of lock in with other people for that fleeting moment where everyone's on the same page and you're able to really create something gorgeous and from a shared energy and from a shared headspace. And it's really fucking hard to do. As someone who's like tried to get musicians to play his music, that they have no emotional attachment to, that's purely mercenary, it's hard. So like I can only, it's I can only imagine how much harder it would be to like.
This idea is kind of like a traveling Wilburys, but like Lupe-minded people. So like in my contributions, I would say Lupe, J Electronica. I'd like Preservation along for the ride. And I think that would be a fun deal. Who else do you think would be for this? Yasin Bey? Do you want to throw? Like, who do you want to
Yeah, Yasin would be cool. I think I would love if Lupe would get down with some of my producer homies. I think Fest Grandiose is like the best kept secret in Chicago. And if Lupe was able to link with him for something, I think they could do something really cool and weird. And I think that's kind of generally how I feel about every project we're going to talk about today. Because I think from like a textured standpoint, I think everyone could have gone weirder and could have gone a little more psychedelic. I mean, again, I'm literally coming off of making a psychedelic hip hop album. So that's very much where I'm looking and where I'm thinking. I don't want clean. I want ripples off the body kind of thing. And I think look, you gotta crawl before you run, and especially in this moment of rebirth and kind of rejuvenation, it's like, yo, for the next one, how who do I gotta call to make that happen? Because I think
I'm with you.
Yeah. So I think it a great reason why I bring up Fest. Do you know Kahari Lemuel?
No. Oh, Kari. No.
Yeah. So he's got to be one of the most talented people I've ever met. Like, period. We did a show. Do you know BBU, Bin Laden Blown Up, or Black, Brown, and Ugly, the Shot on Dance No More group from Chicago?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they had like, yeah, they're my friends. I remember I did the release show for Epic from BBU like I think 9 years ago, and he had Kahari come and play. Kahari literally pulled up in an HVAC outfit and then hits play on his laptop, and it's like part operetta meets musical. And none of that was bad. Like, it was like he's just singing like Rock of Ages, like really soulful shit. And and then we ended up meeting for a little bit, and I found out he ended up getting asked to do a whole bunch of things with certain people, and I think he's more kind of on his own wave. But I saw him perform with Fess a few weeks ago when they opened for Isaiah Collier, and it was this gorgeous thing because Fest is doing more stuff with like drum machines and like modular synths and stuff like that, and then Kahari pulls up with a cello, and they hadn't done a lick of rehearsing, but they just pull up and do. So I think Kahari Lemuel and Fest Grandiose, and then a cast built around that for a Lupe would be the coolest thing ever. And especially if Lupe were to pick up an instrument as well to kind of like, because that's the one question I asked. If somebody doesn't play an instrument, what do I do with myself in the moments where the band's doing its thing? You know, like, should I get a triangle? Should I get a tambourine? I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Probably not. But, you know, I want to figure out a way to interact with the music in my way. So maybe there's a way he could do that too. Hell, maybe he's the one messing around with the visualizer, because, you know, there's all sorts of like ways you can set up drum pads to trigger visualizers and stuff. So yeah, that would be my pick.
That's awesome. So Kay, let's talk about an album that I think me and Rich would probably agree needs to push weirder. Is Forest in the City by Umi. You listen to this?
Yeah.
So like, and correct me if I'm wrong or I'm out of touch here, but like there's parts that, and maybe I put this on the docket because I didn't know how I felt about it. And I wanted to like sit with it for a bit. But I think where I ended up was there's parts of this album where I'm like, that's Umi. That's really some Umi shit.
Agreed.
There's parts of this album where I'm like, is that an LMA song?
Oh, LMA. Yes.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for me, when I hear when I hear a guitar start out on an R&B track, like it just really gives me cringe vibes now. And I don't know what it is. Like it just, maybe I've heard it too much, like the guitar opening for an R&B track, but it's just not, it makes me wary.
The gentle strumming of the guitar.
Because I already know what they're going for. I already know where this is going, and I'm like, oh, okay. And there were several tracks. There were several tracks on this album that started with that. And so it was just kind of okay. Long story short, it was just very uneven to me. But as you said, there were some high points, but there were some points where it was just kind of blah to me.
Yep. What, Rich, where would you, on this album, I think there's 15 songs. What would you say, would you point out, like, this is what you did right and you should grow with?
Honestly, I thought I liked the back half of the album better than the first half. I thought it was way more dynamic in terms of like what she was doing sonically, or what her and her producers were doing. I don't know who produced the album. Was it self-produced, or are there other people involved?
Good
Sorry.
question.
Yeah, either way, the choices that were made ultimately, I think it's a shame that those songs are in the back half, because, you know, as someone maybe casually listening, I don't know if I would have made it that far, honestly, because I think, yeah, there's a lot of predictability in a lot of respects. And I think great voice. Love the voice.
Beautiful voice.
You know, the things that were frustrating to me is like, especially with, like, it's funny you mentioned the guitar, because like there are multiple songs with guitar, and I you know, if you're going to do that, where's the wrinkle? Where's the surprise of that moment? And is that a layering of a second guitar? Are you adding effects to it? I mean, there are tools with which to make this more unique, because otherwise I think, unfortunately, and I'm going to sound like, I don't mean to sound like a dick, but it sort of was cookie cutter for me in the offing. And then as it opened up, I think I saw glimpses of what could be. And, you know, I think that's I guess why I would definitely, you know, keep checking stuff out. I think the other thing that is a problem for me in this moment is like I feel like I know recently I was listening to Arlo Parks, and I just loved what she did with her album. Not totally different vibes, totally different vocalists, but I think I know what kind of vein I'm more looking for. I think my introduction to Arlo Parks was through a remix from Unknown Mortal Orchestra. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yep.
But like a guy like him, you know, him and like he's great because his production's like super great break beats. I could rap to every single one of his songs, but meanwhile he's got these like sugary psychedelic pop elements to it that just, you know, hook into you and you don't want to let go of you. And I think, you know, linking with someone like that, who I think can build more surprise and build more kind of, I guess, like interior moments within a record, I think would be great. You know, or like a Tame Impala, I don't know, just to name a couple of people that I think are really good at creating dreamier things. Because I think, you know, especially when I think, you know, Forest in the City or whatever, I'm kind of expecting something I think a bit more enchanted or enchanting. And I think there's definitely things to recommend. obviously very talented, and obviously I am not the target audience for this. So me not necessarily having this resonate with me, I'm not surprised by that. But since I'm being asked that, yeah, that I think that second half really has a lot more to say and to show for who she is and what she can do. And I think it's a shame that they threw it on the back half of it, like almost like we're gonna hide this. I'm like,
Right.
why hide this when you could show this earlier? And then I think someone would be more likely to get through the whole thing. And I know you said you had like an alternate track list, right?
No, that is for our next album.
Oh,
That
sorry,
is
my
for
fault.
Duke Deuce.
My fault. Okay.
My Duke Deuce.
Which I yeah, I guess
I
I would say,
restructured the Duke Deuce.
yeah, I would agree with that too.
So, but this one's pretty clear cut, right? Like, it's easy to workshop this. The problem is, "Say I'm Your Love" sounds like a song anybody could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good song, but like, it's not your song, right?
Right.
It's not, that's kind of the code that Rihanna had to crack. Like, these have to be my songs. They can't just be good, right? You have to think about me when you hear it. It can't come out of a bin.
Signatures.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in terms of signatures, 100 Days. Wish That I Could. Like, these are songs where like all of a sudden the drums kick in and it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, okay.
The energy, I mean, I think with her, the contradiction when the tracks, so for me, my favorites were Too Late and Everything Will Be All Right. And I think of Everything Will Be All Right in particular because I think when there's energy in the track, and I guess the energy would be drums in your case, there's like contradiction, and there's a tension with her vocals that's like really intriguing in a way that I think she should explore in the future.
Totally.
Because like other than that, it's all very like sleepy time music to me, to put it bluntly.
It's real talk, and it's a real problem in R&B. Sleepy time music is a real problem in R&B because people are like, they want to evoke kind of a D'Angelo, Maxwell feeling. And what they end up doing is making the same kind of song over and over again.
Yeah, that repetitive nature really stuck with me with this one, where I just this kind of an experiment. I like would fast forward a little bit to see if anything had changed. There was no surprises to be had. It was like
No.
I get the melody line. Not to discredit the lyricism or anything like that. I needed to see if there was any surprises hidden in there, and it's just like, okay, like this is what it is. It's not doing more than what it is in that way.
So, by the way, Rich, I want to answer your question from earlier. Who produced this? Everyone produced this.
Everybody produced it.
Everyone. Matt Keane, V-Ron, Logic's Mind, my boy John, the Fisticuffs, Nasaya, River Tiber, Jacob. Like, it
River
took the whole world.
Great.
Yeah.
And Jacob is great too, if it's who I'm thinking of.
So I would love, my recommendation would be work with one producer and don't make a song until it scares you.
Well, to that one, that resonates deeply. Blankets is a record that kind of scared me, and it was just because I could see the abyss of what I was looking at, and do I dare go for it, or do I stay on the side of the pool and keep my put my feet in the water? And that's the extent. So yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
loudly.
I think for R&B in particular debuts, there is a strong correlation between the artist, and the album is as good as the artist and the producer relationship for those albums. So you're right. I think, sticking with one producer or two who have like a strong vision and who can see your voice, see your artistry in an objective sense, would have been really helpful for her.
And you remember that line? I think this is one of Kay's favorite moments in the hip hop, is when Jay-Z said, "I never had a great flow like Busta Rhymes." But
I wasn't animated like, say, Busta Rhymes, or make up stuff in a whole bunch of lines, but the real stuff you get when you break down my lines, add that to the fact. Well, yes.
So the point is, Kay, what Jay, and I've always kind of yelled back at Jay listening to it. So it's like, no, you don't get it. You had the advantage. People with animated, exciting flows, they get to skate on it. It's enough. Because it's enough, no one pushes them to go further. Mm-hmm. Jay spent years with people like me who were bored with it. And he fought me. He was like, "Fuck you, I'm changing this shit." You know? I'm working with Rick Rock now. What? And like flipping shit on me. So that persistence came out of a perceived disadvantage, but it was really an advantage. So in this case, Umi's disadvantage is her voice with the strum of a light guitar is very pretty. It's enough. But it's not enough to separate you from other people who have those skills.
Right.
I guess the question is, and I'm in the dark on this, is, obviously people can develop their own fandoms kind of using various avenues. So I'm curious if she's someone who's like TikTok famous, or like, where her fan base comes from. Because I guess in that moment, to the question of of it being enough, I know something I thought about when I was listening to this is like, is my issue with this that I know too much about other shit? If I was less informed, would I, or if I was less curious about other music, would this be fine for me, and would I be into this? And I think for certain people there's definitely a vein in the world that is less inquisitive and is asking less questions of, and is looking for less out of the shit that they're listening to. So I feel like part of what I struggled with is like, am I being critical because I've just conditioned myself to be overly critical? And if I wasn't so predisposed, would this be a better listen for me? Or is this, I guess, yeah, again, I know I'm not the target audience. The audience that appreciates this is already there, obviously. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're missing missing me if I'm not in the pack, but it does make me wonder, are the things that we're looking for in terms of having stuff challenge us? I know that's what we want, but are we part of like a really niche group of people where that's the case? Or is this just meant to just be enjoyed and not thought about too much more deeply than that?
Yeah, it's up to her, right? I mean, that's certainly up to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I think of the two people that I thought of, like when I was comparing it, was Janae Kale and her work, and then actually Sade.
Ooh.
And in terms of Sade, like Sade is, for me, like Sade is kind of in that vein of, trying to make that cool type of R&B and whatnot. But I think what worked for her more, and I think what Umi could do more, is and this is kind of what Janae does as well, is interject more of her personality into the lyrics, or into the singing. Because technically, on a technical level, yes, it's very pretty and it's aesthetically pleasing, musically aesthetically pleasing to hear, but there's not enough of her personality to create like a hook or intrigue. So I think if she injected some of that into it in her next project, that it would help her a little bit more.
And I believe that Umi wants to get there.
Yeah.
Because of the writing. If you actually listen to what she's saying, it's unique. It's a unique set of things that are being discussed. It's just like the sounds are kind of bland. And I think if Umi was here and we were like, look, you're already good enough to be on generic title R&B playlist of 2022. You're already there. And you're going to get paid. You good? I think Umi would be like, no, not good. I think Umi wants to be defined, better defined. And I think you have to seek out music that pushes you.
Yeah.
So, does that make sense, Rich?
Definitely.
So
excited for the next one, and because I listened to this one, I will listen to the next one. Whatever.
Absolutely.
Like
Crunkstar. That's right, Deuce. It's I love this album. I love it so much, but it is like I love it while explaining that it has issues. It is like maybe the worst sequenced best album that I've heard. I love it, but it is sequenced like a madman in the grocery store with a shopping cart. Just dumping things in.
Explain the importance of, so we have context. Explain the importance of sequencing for you.
I mean, when you hear like Smoke Detector, right? You understand why these songs go into each other. Why the disco song sequences into arguing. You know, like you understand what the motifs are. There really aren't. The motif isn't there here, and so the transitions they're not transitions. It feels like a data dump, but good data, but data that was dumped. I reordered this album how I think it should be. I cut it down to 14 songs from 20.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. And for those at home trying to make their own Dano approved Deuce experience, I can give you the order. And Kay, if you want to pull up the official track listing and look at what I've done, you can do that.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it up.
I do too.
So, I'm going to start out with Open Up. I love Open Up.
Track 7.
Yep. You start out, open up, motherfucker, open up. That's a great. Why is that not the opener? Ridiculous. Number 2, like, I was mad when I heard that Rico Nasty and Deuce did a song together, and it's track 9?
5.
5? No. Give me that number 2. Go right. I need Rico Nasty immediately. That's a great song. And then number 3, I'm going to go because I think it really does start to give personality and texture. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I really like Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Track 13.
Lyrical, like he really starts to explain where his energy comes from. Track 4, I'm going to go with Hell Nah.
Yeah.
That's track 4. Okay, so that one, you know that one, right?
And then track 5, we're going to start to change the tempo here. I Get Crunk, which I think is amazing. Like maybe my favorite song.
Track 9. That's track 9 on the original.
Yep, I'm going 5. And then 6 is Rage. We're kicking it right up after the I Get Crunk. And then
11.
Shift into Running Out of Love, number 7.
Track 18. Wow. This is like, wow.
Yep. We get then number 8, title track, Crunkstar, right in the middle. Number 9, Money Bandana.
Track 10.
Track 10, I ain't worried about it, which I enjoy. Then 11, Animosity with Lil Yachty. 12, Flip the Switch. 13, Living Life. 14, I'm Alive Again. So we're taking out Encore. We're taking out From Now On. We're taking out WTF, Crowd Control, DJ Toots Live, and Just Say That.
I generally agree with that. I low key, I think this is just me showing my age and preference. I would have maybe gone track 2 with Flip the Switch, but I get wanting to get right into it with Rico. I just kind of feel like, you know, having the Juicy J co-sign early. I mean, look, putting it later,
That's
great.
fair.
You
That's
know,
fair.
if it gets people to listen to it later in the album, fantastic. I know that's, you know, a good trick. And I think given my sense of this album after listening to it, you know, I appreciate that on one hand it's like junior levels of homage in certain sense to the predecessors, but he's very obviously trying to like make his own space in this genre and in this form.
Right.
So like I don't think it's not reverential to the point of just being like carbon copy, you know, and paste of what's preceded him, and not in any way. But yeah, so I know he probably the better call to have Rico earlier than later. But yeah, just me as a longer in the tooth listener, you know, Juicy's gonna catch my eye a little bit more.
I'm with you, and I like. There's too many great, important cosigns on here to leave them around, to leave them near the back half like that. So, but Rich, did any of my cuts offend you? Are you missing any of those?
I think the DJ Toots live transition, I think, you know, you need that. Maybe you open with that into Open Up. But no,
okay.
No, I don't feel offended. I think that my issue with this album, if anything, is again, I think you're right to want to cut things down anyway, just because at a certain point it's repetitive. And obviously he very much knows the theme. He knows what his marching orders are in terms of what he's going to do with this. I think a shorter experience versus a longer experience in this way is definitely for the better, especially if the production isn't going to transition really away into anything other than with I'm Alive Again, because that was kind of more like the slower kind of almost like Little Flippy kind of vibe to it, even, you know, for like when Little Flip would have like a slower joint on like Underground Legend or something like that. So, you know, I appreciate wanting to end on that note for sure. But yeah, I think I know the type of music I get excited by coming out of Memphis, and it's a bit more like in the vein of like Tommy Wright the Third, you know, 8-Ball MJG, shit like that. And you know, that's just me. That's just to my taste. And I deeply appreciate, as I said, what I think he's trying to do with this, where he's, you know, he pays his respects to his predecessors, but in no way is that meant to serve as any sort of like, you know, putting him underneath the pedestal of someone else. No, he's trying to be Duke motherfucking Deuce. And I think he pulls it off. And I think the thing that makes this such a fun listen is, you know, he's such a character. The way he uses his voice is like Ferg-esque in terms of the way he's willing to just scream. And, you know, right. I think the thing that made me saddest listening to this album is like, it just made me really want to see this live and to go to a show and experience this sort of energy. Cause like, it's just not going to happen while I'm listening to it on my AirPods at my storage unit. You know what I mean? That is, I'm not getting crunk at the extra space storage. I'm working, you know what I mean? So I think, you know, context of what you're listening to is important. And I mean, it's great turn up music. I can imagine, you know, if I hear any of this stuff on the rare occasion where I do go out this summer, I'm going to be into it, you know, because the shit goes. He obviously has a good ear for what works well for him. I think just, you know, finding ways to mix it up a bit and cutting fat, I think would do him well. Because, you know, I think if it's not a super complicated thought as to what we're getting here, you know what I mean? We're not dealing with like a Lupe, you know, kind of thesis sort of thing. I mean, there is a thesis. It's just that he's a Crunkstar and he's going to show you, and it's going to be crunk music to the core. And I think that's great. It's just that at a certain point, there's an overload to that. I think Lupe accomplished the same thing over 10 songs that he could have done in 14. You know, and you know, so
100%. And I think that's why I would say you can't have Just Say That and I Ain't Worried About It. It's like you get one of those, right? And then you move on.
Do you think that sort of decision maybe gets made, especially in terms of like what happens with streaming? Like I know like the Migos were overloading their albums with like all level of filler just for, you know, the play counts and just to kind of have more stuff for people to just like mindlessly run up.
Yeah, I mean it's like you take your chances. Like, look, I'm gonna give you 20 tracks. you may like 3 of them. You just got to go through the other 17 and find the 3 that you like. So I think that's kind of the philosophy for a lot of the artists nowadays.
Yeah, that's the saddest part. Is this feels like a post-album album, where it's like Deuce is like album, whatever, cohesion, whatever. This is about you put as much interesting stuff out there, and you make people listen to all of it, and they certify you platinum somehow, from all that. So it's, that's the game. I think it's the that 300 label. You know what I'm talking about?
Was that Meg's old label?
Talking about Lear Cohen 300?
Yeah, Lear Cohen. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. 300 has a bunch of people like that, right?
Yeah. This.
Yeah. They signed a bunch of, Shy Glizzy and people like that who kind of do that kind of stuff. So that's cool. And I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying, like, man, as you grow older, you might want to make a real album. You might get bored, right? And just be like, what if it was perfect? And I think that might happen here. Because there's growth, right? There's growth as you go along. And I think that's, but I was impressed. By how many different kinds of songs there are on here for a Crunk album.
I mean, it feels like a throwback in that sense, because what do you think? Kings of Crunk was probably 20 songs when that came out, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's a throwback in that sense, in terms of just like we're throwing it all out there, and that is what it is. But I think I don't know. I'm excited to listen to this album in the context of like having a couple beers with my friends, and we're maybe out somewhere with people rubbing shoulders whenever we can do that.
Right.
I think otherwise, if it's, because I know there's people that say, there's X amount of types of music. There's music to walk to, or to cook to, or to drive to, whatever the fucking context people want to have for why they listen to music. And I think like this is excellent party music, and I think he's proven that. I mean, he's interesting. He's sold himself as a character and as kind of an idea, and in a way that I think will provide him the longevity he needs for sure. But yeah, I guess not to be repetitive, I guess, but I guess in the same ways that I wish, Umi had taken some chances. I'm curious what a chance looks like for him, in terms of like, what does a weirder song look like for him? Because like, I think it's there, and this is the moment where like, I think in a previous era, somebody like the Hood Internet would have done some crazy remix where like they put like Sexy Boy over Duke Deuce or something, and like, and people lose their minds. I think I remember there was like one song with The Dream that they remixed with like a Cut Copy song. It's actually how I found out about Cut Copy, and I was like, damn, this is like almost better than the actual Dream song that it's from. And I think in that way, yeah, I don't want to leave it to the chance of like a Girl Talk level remixer for him to do it. I think he could do it naturally, and I think it would in a lot of cases for artists it would be smart, just because it would introduce people to different audiences to these other audiences that exist, and maybe generates an even bigger audience. You know what I mean? Where it's like, and it could initially come from a space of novelty, but then could eventually evolve to a place of genuine appreciation and support. I think obviously we see mixed genre tours and stuff like that. Like you'll have like fucking Run the Jewels open for Lord or some shit like that, which like great agent. Their agent deserves like all the fruit baskets for pulling that one off. But yeah, I think in this case, like I think there's folks kind of on the underground side of things that I think he'd do well to at least pick up the rocks and see what's underneath and see what he could do. Because for me there wasn't anything that was like a surprise. And I think that's, much like with Umi, like I wasn't terribly surprised by this album. It was exactly what I knew I was going to get. It was executed very well. He's great. I wonder, what is there another room? Is there another level? Is there another space that exists where he could get weirder? Because if he can, that'd be, I would love to see that.
I think I have a pitch.
Okay.
For him getting weirder.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So E40's been around a long time, right? E40 did songs with Tupac and all that shit, right? And in 2010, really changed his career. In 2010, he released a sequence of albums called Revenue Retrieving. Okay, you should find the Wikipedia on this. He released a series of albums. The first one was Revenue Retrieving Day Shift. Then it was Revenue Retrieving Night Shift. And those, you can see in those two covers what the theme is, right? And then in 2011, Revenue Retrieving Overtime Shift. And I believe also in 2011, Revenue Retrieving Graveyard Shift. So, and E40 makes E40 music, right? Like, it's not like, I love E40. He's one of my favorites ever, but it's variations on what he does.
Mm-hmm.
What he did with Revenue Retrieving was he created different flavors of E40. This is Day Shift. It's got songs called Lightweight Jamming.
To make an even worse comparison, it's like Nelly with Sweat and Suit. So maybe the next one is like instead of Crunkstar, Crunk Superstar. I don't know. How do you Crunkstar XL? I don't know. I see the vision. I see where you're going with it. I dig the conceit. It allows for it almost reminds me of like all the different EPMD album titles, just like, back to business, still in business.
Yeah, I mean, if Duke Deuce announced, like, my next album's going to be called Crunk Block Party, and the one after that's going to be Crunk White Party, like, that's a fun deal, like, he's got to create flavors for the sounds so they're different in some way.
Crunk flamenco music.
Love it.
It could go global, hit the Latin market, make a mint.
I love it.
A Duke Deuce Bad Bunny song, I'd hit play.
How fun is that? How fun is that? And you know what? Pitbull's out there.
I have a deep hatred of Pitbull, so I mean, good for him if he pulls it off. But
ready.
Pitbull's ready for the Duke Deuce. Glad Pitbull wants to get crunk. My gosh, I remember when Pitbull was like an anti-Castro, like political rapper, very briefly, back in like 2003. It was like, but anyways, his evolution, that's a whole other episode you could do.
Pitbull's got jams with Blake Shelton. He can work with Duke Deuce. It's not
that's not a strong. Well, it's fun. It's funny you bring up the Blake Shelton thing, because like there were certain, I forget which song, but there was one song on here that like kind of was giving me like almost like country vibes, and it brought up one of my favorite Steve Earle quotes about modern day country music, basically saying it's rap music for white people that are scared of black people. And it just got me thinking about how many people like Blake Shelton have like taken this thing and kind of like made it their own, removed from any sort of like relationship to him. I mean, like Blake Shelton saying, "Can I get a what? Put it in my cup." Like, it's like literally jacking Jay. I hope Jay-Z got like a check, or whoever helped write that song got a check for like the whatever interpolation that was.
Right.
And then obviously making reference to cups. Like, do you think Blake Shelton sipping lean? Highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely.
I'm curious what like, you know what though, I know I needed to check out the book about him. I'm curious what DJ Screw did or could do with like country music, because I know he was flipping all sorts of old school stuff. Who knows?
Oh, DJ Screw would be
I miss DJ Screw. I feel like could have been the real connector between like country and hip hop in like a healthy, not shitty way.
But yeah.
R.I.P.
Screw. No, it's. Do you have anything else on this, Kay, or have we covered the Deuce?
I mean, to be honest, I wasn't a fan of it, but what I'll say is I think moving forward, because we'll focus on the positive, moving forward, I think he could do a little bit of, of world building. I think do a better job of world building. Like I think of,
Agreed.
so when I think of Memphis, I mean, I obviously think of 3 6 Mafia, but I think my point of reference would be Hustle and Flow, the Hustle and Flow soundtrack.
Right.
So I think of Hard Out Here for a Pimp and in particular Whoop That Trick. And those are just those tracks are I don't know if they'd be considered crunk, but they're so synonymous with the Memphis sound. Because I think they give or the Memphis rap scene, because I think they give a peek into what life is like in Memphis. So I think he'd be better served moving forward to give us, like, I've never been to Memphis. So when I hear your music, it should be a peek into life, what life is like in Memphis. That would be the draw for me. Like UGK, Riding Dirty. I've been to Houston now, but before I'd heard that album, I'd never been to Houston. So that was like my peek into that region. So I think that would better serve him, building the world a little bit better and giving us glimpses of what his life is like in Memphis.
And you remember Isaiah Rashad, The House is Burning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deuce was on the lead single.
Oh.
Yeah. And I guess in light of that feature, I dig the way that Isaiah Rashad's able to make hard shit that still has like a lot of different wrinkles and surprises and like shades of how it's presented. And I think and not that I expected him to do the same thing, but I think he'd do well. It'd be cool if he took more of a page. Because to Kay's point, where is kind of the world building other than it can be one note in terms of the messaging, whereas if as we're all humans are complicated. Is there more? is there another thing you can show other than being is there a downside to being a Crunkstar? Let's hear that song. Maybe you went too hard. Maybe you went too you got too crunk. So what does it sound like after you got a little too crunk and need to chill out?
If he makes that song, Jim Jones has to be on
it.
or maybe Devin the Dude.
Ooh, I love that lineup. I love that lineup.
Jim Jones, Devin the Dude, and
do we call it when Crunk goes too far? When Crunk goes too far.
Yeah. I love it.
So but Isaiah Rashad is so good at making The House is Burning a world, right? And there's all kinds of interesting folks in Memphis. YG Tut, that he could just lock in with. It's very inventive. Obviously, Namir Blade is Tennessee, I think Chattanooga, and that album is so inventive.
Absolutely.
Hell, while we're at it, Cities of Eve.
Right.
Cities of Eve is in Memphis. Not obviously, people are gonna move how they move and work with who they want to, but that could be an interesting pairing.
Yeah, and I think that better serve, like when I think of Southern music, like I even go to like Cash Money back in the late 90s. That was a peak, like back that thing up. That was a peak into New Orleans life. And that's why it's so resonant. I was driving last week and I heard that on the radio. Mm-hmm. That song's over 20 years old, and that they play that on the radio. So that that's the vein I think that he would better serve. He'd be better served going, like giving us a glimpse of, one, world building, and then two, giving us a glimpse of life in Memphis.
That's why I took WTF off of the track listing, because while it was fun and I liked it originally, I feel like he's outgrown it. I feel like there's other songs on here that are better and more interesting. And I just can't wait to see the growth. Because it's so unique. It's such a unique, he's the only person in this lane. So I'm rooting for him.
Yeah.
Yep. But let's go recommendation corner. Okay. One of my favorite people that I discovered this year is a gentleman named Big Chico.
Chico.
You remember Big Chico? When we
Yes.
talked about Dash? Yep. Blackberry White is the album from this year.
Yes.
We already talked about it. I went back, did some Deuce research. I'm sorry, some Big Chico research. 2016 has an album called Soul God. And it's fucking perfect. It's amazing. Big Chico is just one of the most refined, cool Southern cats out there doing this. Nobody's moving at this kind of slow pace anymore. With it's just thick as molasses in terms of what's being delivered. So that's one recommendation. I'm also very excited. My pre-order is in for Mudslide, which is Small Professor and Vic Spencer.
Oh, wow.
That'd be cool.
Yep. Small Pro and Philly meets Chicago.
Small Pro, what up?
Mild sauce on the cheesesteak.
Oh, that's it. That's it. So, and the songs are dope. Flea Lord is on it. There's just a lot of cool stuff, going on with that. I can't wait. Small Pro's been killing it this year. I got an advanced copy of the Wrecking Crew album, Sedale Threat.
Oh, wow.
And I listened to it today, and oh my fucking God. Now, everybody who listens to it better know about basketball. This is the only basketball hip-hop album I've ever heard in my life. It's unbelievable.
I'm intrigued now.
There's Bill Walton audio clips on this. This is insane what they're doing. This couldn't be, the only way this could be more basketball is if Woj was like introing it. But like, this is Castro's coming out party as one of the 5 best rappers in the world.
Oh, okay.
Castro's undeniable. So I'm excited for everybody to hear it. The other shout out, I want to do a Chicago shout out, and I told Kay about this, but I'm reading Her Word is Bond by Psalm 1. It's awesome. It's really good so far.
I actually need to go pick up my copy of that book. I pre-ordered it and it's been ready for me for like a week. So I'm excited to dive in.
It's Psalm 1 is so cool, and someone could have chosen to write this in a very like, I'm gonna dazzle you with my prose kind of way. Because definitely has that gear, but this is just very relatable and very conversational. Very human. It's beautiful.
Hell yeah.
Yep. So I'm into that. And So Rich, what are you bumping? What do you want people to be bumping?
I mean, it's a Homer party on this end. I've been super into Davis's Portraits project, the little 9-minute joint
9 minutes
he did with Joshua Virtue. So that's been heavy rotation. Also in the Y camp, Malky and his partner Gio, they released a project under the name Black Seinfeld called Season 1, and that album, I'm not kidding. The first time I threw that on, it was when I was in my previous car, which didn't have like a way for me to connect my phone to the sound system, so I was essentially transistor radio listening to things while driving around. And I not kidding, I was fist pumping while driving, while listening, because it was just like, I don't know, it was life-giving. I really dug how they did it. I just, everything about it was just so fresh and fun, and they're just such great people. So off bat from the same corner from the Y camp, I think Davis and Black Seinfeld are really special. I mean, Def C is just, the guy's hitting half court shots, like he's Kevin Durant size, but he's hitting like Steph. So You know, it's really inspiring to see and to you know, I don't know, kind of watch in real time as someone who like is like his friend.
The collaboration with Boathouse doesn't feel fair.
Well, I look, I left. Yeah, well, I guess I'm getting. Yeah, I may or may not have been in a studio with both of them before I got on this interview. And you're right, it isn't fair. So yeah, I'm really, I don't know. I feel like I'm loving that he's linked with Closed Sessions, and that I think he's got the platform to really let people appreciate him for who he is without any compromise. And I think for a lot of us, and I think this is about our generation of artists, you know, I think there are so many trends that we lived through at a certain point. If you made it at the other side, I think now a lot of us can actually be ourselves, because it's like, you know, I think more comfortability or confidence in that. So, you know, I think he's just gonna get crazier and crazier and crazier. And then yeah, I mean, aside from that, I've been listening to a lot of Todd Rundgren. So if you've never listened to Todd Rundgren, and you want to listen to some weird 70s rock that's like at once pretty but also kind of, you know, interesting lyrically, I'd say he's great. He's great to listen to. I don't know, listening to him kind of made me feel more at ease with the sounds that are in my head. Not to say I'm a musical genius like him, but it's like, okay, so other people are making things that I'm kind of just thinking about, or made things I'm already thinking about. So that's kind of reassuring in a way. So now it's my job to just freak it harder.
Yeah, no, that was
you
the
know.
difference. Like I heard your RMPP interview with Rohan. It was great. When he said "see you all the time" sounded like a Beatles song to him. I was like, no. I was like, it sounds like those weird 70s guys. It sounds like Harry Nilsson.
Okay, so he's right, because we with the vocal, the harmonizing, yeah, I could hear that, because I made a point to like kind of have those poke in. I think it's more. I was looking at more like Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, kind of like, I'm thinking like English drinking song, but you know, I'm not English, and we're singing about going to New Orleans.
Right. Yeah, no, those weird 70s like Randy Newman, Harry Nilsson kind of people who just hit you with weird shit out of nowhere. Yeah.
Well, and that's the weird thing is the Todd Rundgren part. I didn't, you know, I was listening to that when the shit was done, so it was more kind of, you know, it's more for what's next for me. I think is, you know, seeing what I'm vibing with and who I can learn from and borrow from, and you know, stand whose shoulders can I stand on today, and then someone will stand on mine tomorrow, etc. So if you're looking for a good oldie, I feel like he's great. And I'm also just gonna recommend this. I'm gonna go oldies, because you know, I feel like there's so much. It's new music if you've never heard it. So um Oswald, a new chapter of dub. Let me just make sure that that's the title of it. But it's been that's been probably in some of my heaviest rotation ever. I just ever since I saw the movie Babylon. Yeah, a new chapter of dub. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the film Babylon, but it was banned. It was banned after being shown at cons, because they were like, this is going to cause race riots in England, because it dared to present English people as racist shitheads.
I've heard of this. I've heard of this. Yeah.
Well, so it basically got banned, and then was like not publicly shown, I don't think, until like 2008 or something like that. And Oswald, or like the group that like was like the guys playing the sound system crew, that's like the focal point of this movie. So that led me to their music, and then like this album specifically. I mean, I've driven around all sorts of different parts of the country this year while bumping that, and that's been really nice. And then last but not least, I know I'm probably over my limit, but there's a producer from Nova Scotia called Jazz Ali, and he has a project called Bus's Rebellion, and it's probably my favorite beat tape that I've heard this year. It's just like the freshest shit ever. I don't know, man. There's like a golden quality to his production. I don't know if it's just with the equipment he's using or whatever filters he's playing with on the back end, but it's like this. I sent it to Montana Max, and you know, Montana Max is not one necessarily to be effusive with praise. And he hit me back being like, I just freestyled to this guy's tape for the last 20 minutes at home, which he like almost never says. So I'm like, oh, that's a big cosign if you know, someone who's tough to impress is like, I And who doesn't honestly like rap publicly anymore is like I was rapping to myself for over 20 minutes. Like, you know, so give that a listen. Inspiring music for sure.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Kay, what do you got for the people? Give me some.
I'm just looking. I mean, nothing this week, but I'm looking forward to Brent Fayez Wasteland coming out on Friday.
Right. Fast. A lot of pressure on that.
So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Good deal. Looking forward to Kyrie as a Laker. Is that your thing?
Not so much.
Is that going to happen?
I don't know.
No, he needs to stay. He needs to stay unless Russ is going to the Nets, which he probably would. And KD is staying. I want to see a KD Russ reunion.
That would be lovely. KD Russ back together again. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for rocking with us. R.I.P. Fred the Godson.